Imagine for a moment that every bite of food you eat carries not just calories, not just nutrients, but energy, a vibration that speaks directly to your soul. Now think about this. What if some of the most common foods we consume are quietly altering not just our bodies, but our very consciousness? What if the act of eating certain things is blocking us from reaching higher states of spiritual awareness? Today, we will explore a topic that has been hidden, ignored, and even ridiculed, yet it appears in sacred texts, ancient wisdom traditions, and modern research alike: the spiritual consequences of eating pork. This is not just a discussion about diet or health. It is about the unseen effects of what we choose to place within the vessel of our spirit. And stay with me until the end, because the last revelation is the most powerful of all, one that may forever change how you view your connection to food, to energy, and to the divine itself. Before we dive deeper, if you are someone who seeks truth beyond appearances, who wants to understand the sacred link between body, mind, and spirit, then I invite you to support this journey. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this message. What you'll discover here could completely transform your understanding of life and consciousness. For thousands of years, spiritual masters, prophets, and philosophers have warned humanity about the dangers of consuming certain animals, and none have been mentioned more consistently than the pig. The prohibition of pork can be found in the Torah, in the Quran, and echoed by early Christian mystics, Pythagorean schools, and even in the Eastern traditions that recognize the vibrational density of certain foods. But the question is, why? Science tells us that pigs are highly intelligent animals, almost as aware as dogs, capable of emotion, memory, and social connection. Yet from a spiritual perspective, their energetic field carries a resonance that ancient mystics described as dense, chaotic, and impure. In Hebrew mysticism, pork was said to block the channels of divine energy flowing through the human vessel. In Islamic Sufi writings, it was described as a substance that veils the soul. And in the teachings of the Essenes, the mystical followers of Jesus, it was believed that consuming unclean animals darkens the inner light of the spirit. But why would this be? What does it mean that an animal's vibration can influence the energy of a human being? Every living creature emits a frequency, a subtle energy pattern that affects all who come into contact with it. The ancient Egyptians called this ka, the vital essence. The Hindus call it prana. In Chinese philosophy, it is qi. When we eat, we are not only taking in matter, we are taking in memory, frequency, and vibration. If that vibration is harmonious, it supports the alignment of body and spirit. But if that vibration is chaotic or heavy, it can disrupt the balance of our inner world. The pig, by its nature, is a scavenger. It consumes what others discard, decaying matter, waste, even its own kind in moments of desperation. Ancient mystics observed that this behavior imprints upon its energetic field. In other words, what it eats becomes part of what it is, and what it is becomes part of what we take into ourselves when we consume it. Thus, eating pork is not simply a dietary choice, it is an energetic exchange. Think about this. Why do so many spiritual traditions emphasize purification before prayer or meditation? Because energy flows through clarity. The purer the vessel, the more freely the divine can move through it. But when we introduce into our bodies something that carries confusion, suffering, or decay, it lowers our frequency, and that, according to the esoteric teachings, is what distances us from the divine field of love, harmony, and enlightenment. Modern science has only recently begun to grasp this idea in terms of biochemistry and neuroenergetics. Studies in epigenetics show that what we eat can literally alter the expression of our genes, not just in our physical health, but even in our emotional states and mental clarity. So when ancient texts spoke about spiritual impurity, they may have been describing what modern researchers now call energetic or biochemical disharmony. Yet in today's world, these warnings are often dismissed as superstition. People say, it's just food. Oh, but is it? If it were just food, why would so many enlightened beings, from the Buddha who spoke of mindful consumption to Jesus who symbolically broke bread but never spoke of eating flesh, teach about what enters the temple of the body? Could it be that they understood something far deeper? That food is not merely sustenance but spiritual communication? Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how you feel after eating certain foods? Light, peaceful, connected, or heavy, dull, restless? These sensations are not random, they are signals from your energetic body. The pig, revered by some and forbidden by others, is at the center of this mysterious spiritual dialogue between matter and spirit. And we are just beginning to uncover why this connection is so profound. Because what you eat not only becomes your body, it becomes your energy, it becomes your mind, it becomes your consciousness. In the next part, we will explore how the ancient mystics from Egypt to India to the early Christian world describe the metaphysical consequences of consuming pork and how these insights connect to the science of energy, vibration, and consciousness itself. What they knew may surprise you, and it might reveal why avoiding this single food was seen not as a restriction, but as a sacred act of liberation. Throughout the ages, humanity has looked to food not only as nourishment for the body, but as a key to the spirit. The ancient initiates understood that every act of eating was a sacred ritual, a moment in which the visible and invisible worlds meet. The Essenes, for instance, who lived near the Dead Sea and followed teachings attributed to Jesus and other enlightened masters, practiced strict vegetarianism. They believed that the life force within all beings, the divine spark, should not be dimmed by the ingestion of impurity or suffering. Among the foods they strictly avoided was pork, which they considered to be one of the densest and most spiritually obstructive substances. Ancient Egyptian priests too followed similar restrictions. Herodotus wrote that temple initiates would never touch pork, and if they did by accident, they would purify themselves through days of ritual cleansing. Why? Because they believed that pork disturbed the subtle harmony between the ka and the ba, the vital essence and the soul, preventing the ascension of consciousness necessary for contact with the divine realms. For them, the pig was a symbol of material excess, of indulgence in the lower vibrations of existence, a representation of man's attachment to the flesh and the neglect of the spirit. Meanwhile, in Vedic India, the concept of ahimsa, non-violence toward all beings, extended to food as well. Sages taught that to consume an animal that lived in filth or decay was to absorb not only its physical toxins, but also the karmic imprint of its existence. The Manu Smriti, one of the oldest Hindu scriptures, declares that the vibration of certain meats clouds the intellect and veils spiritual perception. Interestingly, these descriptions mirror what modern neurobiology has discovered, that stress hormones, toxins, and inflammatory compounds present in the flesh of suffering animals can alter human mood, mental focus, and even empathy. In other words, ancient mystics were not speaking metaphorically. They were describing energetic truths that science is only now beginning to measure. When we eat, we engage in a sacred exchange, the transformation of one form of life into another. In mystical terms, this act must be done with awareness, gratitude, and alignment, but pork has long been viewed as incompatible with this principle. In the Kabbalistic tradition, it was said that eating unclean animals, especially swine, clogs the sephirot within the tree of life, the spiritual channels through which divine energy flows into human existence. The blockage caused by consuming low-vibration foods was believed to dim the neshama, or the higher soul, binding it closer to the physical plane and making spiritual insight harder to reach. And there is something deeply symbolic in this teaching. The pig, in many cultures, represents gluttony, not in the sense of eating too much, but of consuming without discernment, without consciousness. It is the act of feeding the body while starving the soul. In that sense, the spiritual consequence of eating pork is not a punishment from any deity. It is a natural result of energetic dissonance. When we bring into our temple what does not resonate with purity or higher frequency, we experience disconnection, confusion, and heaviness, not because we are being judged, but because we are out of tune with the music of creation. Consider how the mystics describe the human body as a sacred instrument. Each organ, each cell, vibrates at a unique frequency, forming a symphony of light. When we ingest something discordant, it is as if one note falls out of tune, creating dissonance that affects the entire composition. Over time, that disharmony manifests as physical illness, emotional imbalance, or spiritual numbness. The Essenes warned that the angels of the air and the angels of the water could not dwell in an impure vessel, meaning the subtle energies that elevate consciousness withdraw from a body burdened by heavy vibrations. The consumption of pork, they said, was among the chief causes of such disharmony. In modern times, this understanding finds echoes in quantum biology, a field exploring how subtle energy fields influence cellular behavior. Research into biophotons, the light emitted by living cells, shows that all biological processes emit frequencies of light that correspond to states of health or decay. Foods that are fresh, clean, and harmonious emit coherent light. Those that are toxic or diseased emit chaotic patterns. If this is true, then consuming meat from animals raised in fear or filth, as is common in industrial farming, means introducing incoherent energy into the human system. Spiritually speaking, it is the same principle the ancients described as impurity. Think of how you feel after eating something truly wholesome and alive, fruits, vegetables, grains, compared to the heaviness that follows a dense, greasy meal. That sensation is not merely digestive, it is energetic feedback from your spiritual body. When the energy of life flows freely, your intuition sharpens, your dreams become vivid, your emotions stabilize, and you feel connected to something larger than yourself. But when that energy is blocked or polluted, your inner light grows dim. You may feel anxiety, confusion, or a kind of inner fog that no amount of coffee or rest can dispel. This is what the mystics meant when they said that eating impure food darkens the spirit. Throughout history, every sacred tradition emphasized purity not as an act of restriction, but as an act of alignment. To be pure is to resonate with the divine frequency that sustains creation. To defile the body with chaotic vibrations is to build walls within the temple of the soul. Pork, in this sacred view, represents not just a food choice, but a spiritual symbol, a test of awareness, a reminder to discern between what nourishes and what drains, between what uplifts and what binds. But there is an even deeper layer to this mystery, one that ties the consumption of pork to the very structure of consciousness itself. Ancient initiates taught that the vibration of every substance influences the pineal gland, the mystical seat of the soul. In the next part, we will uncover how the energy of pork directly interferes with this sacred center of spiritual perception, and why awakening it requires a kind of purity the ancients guarded with such devotion. The pineal gland, that mysterious tiny structure hidden deep within the brain, has been called many names across the ages. The third eye, the seat of the soul, the gateway to the divine. Philosophers and mystics believed that through this sacred organ, human beings could perceive realities beyond the physical. René Descartes, one of the fathers of modern philosophy, described it as the principal seat of the soul and the place in which all our thoughts are formed. Ancient Egyptian depictions of the Eye of Horus mirror its exact anatomy, suggesting that long before modern science, initiates already understood its spiritual significance. Now, imagine that this sacred organ is not merely a gland, but an antenna, one that receives frequencies from the higher realms of consciousness. If this is true, then whatever affects its purity directly affects your connection to divine intelligence. Ancient traditions taught that the pineal gland functions best when the body is clean, the mind tranquil, and the spirit aligned. But when toxins, emotional heaviness, or low vibration energies accumulate, this antenna begins to corrode. Its light, which once connected us to intuition, inner vision, and truth, grows dim. This is where the discussion of food, especially pork, becomes far more than a matter of diet. In mystical physiology, the purity of the body's energy channels determines how much divine light can flow through them. The heavier the vibration, the thicker the veil between the self and the sacred. The Essenes taught that the consumption of unclean animals sealed the heavenly gate within the skull, referring to the pineal region. In Hindu and Buddhist traditions, this same gate is known as the Ajna chakra, the third eye. When this center is blocked, perception collapses into the material world. The soul forgets its origin. Modern science, in its own way, has begun to echo these ancient warnings. The pineal gland is one of the most chemically sensitive parts of the body. It absorbs toxins and heavy metals more easily than almost any other tissue. It regulates melatonin, the hormone responsible for sleep cycles, dream states, and emotional balance. But beyond biology, researchers have found that the gland is piezoelectric. It responds to vibration and electromagnetic frequencies. What this means is that it literally translates energy into biological signals. If what we eat carries low vibrational frequency, that disharmony resonates through the entire system, dulling the inner senses. The meat of pigs, according to many traditions, embodies one of the densest frequencies among all animals consumed by humans. Mystics observed that its energy field carries the residue of suffering and stagnation. Pigs, when confined and slaughtered, release high amounts of adrenaline and stress hormones, and these substances remain within their flesh. From a spiritual lens, this is not just biochemistry, it is the imprint of fear. When such energy enters the human body, it interferes with the rhythm of the heart and the subtle energy centers, creating internal noise that prevents the pineal gland from receiving higher frequencies clearly. Think of it as trying to tune a radio. The divine frequency is always broadcasting, but if the signal is surrounded by static, you hear only distortion. Each act of eating can either sharpen or blur the reception. The ancient mystics understood this. They taught that enlightenment is not only a state of consciousness, but also a state of vibration. To ascend, one must lighten the body, not just symbolically, but literally. The less dense the energy within you, the closer you move toward the frequency of light. Consider the teachings of the Greek philosopher Pythagoras, who founded one of the earliest known mystery schools. His students followed a strict plant-based diet, avoiding all animal flesh, but especially pork. Pythagoras said that eating the meat of pigs clouds the mind and binds the soul to material desire. To awaken, one must purify both thought and body. Centuries later, similar principles were echoed in the Gnostic texts, writings hidden for nearly 2,000 years, which warned that the flesh of the swine binds the soul to the shadow of the world. They spoke of it as an energy that dulls inner sight, pulling the consciousness downward toward the densest planes of matter. There is also a symbolic layer in all this. The pig, throughout ancient myth, often represents the lower self, the aspect of humanity consumed by appetite, by the endless hunger for sensory satisfaction. To eat it is, in a way, to partake of that same vibration, reinforcing identification with the physical and forgetting the spiritual. The story of the prodigal son, found in the Gospel of Luke, describes a young man who falls from grace and finds himself feeding pigs, a powerful metaphor for the soul lost in material indulgence. Only when he turns away and returns to his Father, symbolizing divine consciousness, does he find peace again. Could it be that this parable holds a hidden teaching about purity of vibration, that the act of feeding the pigs represents immersion in lower frequencies, and that returning home means restoring harmony with the higher realms? Many mystics believe so. They see dietary purity not as religious restriction, but as a language of energy. Every choice of food says to the universe, "This is the vibration I choose to embody." When the pineal gland is clear, life itself begins to transform. Dreams become luminous, intuition deepens, synchronicities multiply. You start to feel guided, as though the universe whispers directions through signs, symbols, and moments of clarity. But when the inner eye is clouded, confusion reigns. The world appears mechanical, devoid of meaning, and the connection to the sacred fades. Ancient masters warned that nothing clouds this connection faster than living in ignorance of what enters the body. In our time, when technology and artificial stimulation dominate our senses, the pineal gland already struggles to remain active. The modern diet, filled with chemicals, fluoride, and low-vibration foods, adds yet another layer of obstruction. So imagine the compounded effect when pork, dense in energy and rich in residual toxins, becomes a regular part of one's diet. The spiritual system, so sensitive and intricate, begins to close its petals like a flower deprived of light. Yet there is hope, and it is profound. The ancients taught that purification is always possible. Through mindful eating, fasting, meditation, and the cultivation of love and gratitude, the pineal gland can awaken again. In fact, every act of awareness reverses the process of spiritual numbness. And avoiding certain foods, like pork, is not a sacrifice but a liberation, a declaration that you choose alignment with the frequency of life itself. In the final part, we will uncover how avoiding pork and embracing conscious nourishment can realign your entire energetic field, awakening the dormant centers of perception and restoring harmony between your body, soul, and the divine current that flows through all creation. When we begin to see food not as mere sustenance but as sacred energy, everything changes. Eating becomes an act of consciousness. It becomes prayer. The ancients understood that every meal was a ritual, a moment of communion between the seen and the unseen, between the material and the divine. They knew that to eat in alignment with truth was to awaken the light within, and to eat in ignorance was to feed the shadows of the world. By now you can feel it. This is not about fear, dogma, or prohibition. It is about vibration. It is about remembering who you are and what frequencies you allow into your temple. The human body is a magnificent instrument of energy. Every thought, every emotion, every molecule resonates with the symphony of creation. But when we invite dissonance through toxic thoughts, harmful emotions, or the energy of suffering that lives within certain foods, we lose harmony. The spirit dims and we drift further from the awareness of our divine origin. In every ancient mystery school, the first step toward illumination was purification. The Egyptian initiates spent 40 days in silence and clean fasting before being admitted into the inner sanctuaries. The Pythagoreans practiced abstinence from flesh to prepare their minds for the study of sacred geometry and cosmic order. The Essenes bathed daily in living water, cleansing body and soul. They all understood that to carry the vibration of heaven within the body of earth, one must become light. Avoiding pork was not about restriction, it was about refinement. It was a declaration that the seeker chooses clarity over confusion, connection over indulgence, light over shadow. Each act of conscious choice purifies the subtle body, lifting the frequency of thought and emotion. Slowly, the channels of divine communication reopen. The pineal gland, once clouded, begins to radiate again like a crystal receiving sunlight. Dreams become messages, intuition turns into guidance, and life itself begins to feel like a dialogue with the divine. Modern science, although it speaks in different language, continues to validate these ancient insights. Studies show that certain foods influence the electromagnetic coherence of the human heart and brain. When the heart's rhythm becomes chaotic, it interferes with higher brain functions, the very faculties connected with empathy, intuition, and creativity. Consuming the flesh of animals raised in fear or filth introduces chemical signatures of that suffering into the bloodstream. The body becomes a mirror of that energy. Spiritually, it means the vessel vibrates at a lower resonance, reducing the ability to perceive the subtler frequencies of divine intelligence. This is why the masters taught that liberation begins with awareness. Awareness of what you think, what you feel, and what you consume. Every choice becomes an affirmation of your level of consciousness. The act of saying no to pork in this context is not a denial of pleasure, but a recognition of sacred responsibility. You are the guardian of your own temple. The moment you realize this, you awaken a power that cannot be taken from you, the power to choose alignment with life itself. Some will hear this message and dismiss it as superstition. Others will feel something stir deep within, a quiet remembrance, as though they already knew this truth long before hearing it. That recognition is your soul speaking. It is the echo of wisdom carried through centuries of forgotten teachings. When you begin to honor that voice, your energy shifts. You start to crave purity, not out of fear, but because your spirit recognizes what it needs to thrive. The great mystic Paramahansa Yogananda once said, "The food we eat determines the kind of energy that flows through our consciousness." This statement bridges East and West, science and spirit. It reminds us that food is more than matter. It is information. It tells your cells, your emotions, your very aura how to vibrate. When that information is harmonious, your life begins to align effortlessly. You attract peace, clarity, and synchronicity. But when that information is chaotic, confusion, fatigue, and disconnection follow. In this sense, the spiritual consequence of eating pork, or any dense, low-frequency food, is the dulling of your sacred signal to the universe. Yet awareness is liberation. You are not bound by the past or by habit. You have the power to transform your vibration through choice, through intention, through love. Begin by observing how you feel after each meal. Notice which foods make you feel alive, radiant and clear, and which leave you tired, restless, or heavy. Your body never lies. It is the most honest oracle of the soul. When you learn to listen, you no longer need dogma. The wisdom of the divine speaks directly through your own experience. Imagine living in such harmony that every cell of your being resonates with gratitude. Imagine waking each morning feeling light, focused, and connected to a quiet intelligence that guides your every step. That is what the ancient mystics called living in the divine current. They understood that heaven is not a distant place, but a frequency, one that you can tune into through the purity of thought, emotion, and sustenance. When you align with that vibration, the world itself begins to transform around you. The spiritual consequences of eating pork, therefore, are not punishments from outside, they are lessons from within. They remind us that the divine laws of energy respond with perfect reflection. When we consume chaos, we experience chaos. When we consume harmony, we become harmony. The sacred texts were never meant to enslave us with rules. They were maps for liberation, guiding us toward the frequencies where truth, love, and divine awareness flourish. And so, as you finish this reflection, remember this. The journey of awakening begins with awareness, and awareness begins with what you bring into your temple. The simple act of choosing purity over indulgence, light over density, is the first step toward remembering who you truly are, an expression of divine consciousness, capable of shaping reality through vibration. Every meal becomes a prayer, every choice an act of creation. You are not a passive participant in life, you are the alchemist of your own energy. What you eat, think, and feel determines the reality you live in. So choose wisely, choose consciously, and let the vibration of purity guide you back to the luminous truth that has always lived within you. Because when you honor your body as the temple of spirit, you rediscover the sacred truth the ancients knew so well, that heaven begins within. Thanks for looking. Within. Thanks.